I am not a historian, which will soon be painfully obvious. But my point is, you don't have to be a historian to help uncover some of the heritage of the area in which you live. And that's one of the reasons we have this program today. We're hoping to interest some of you people in the activity of digging out photographs, maps, and artifacts pertaining to the early railroad operations in the Brazos Valley. And you'll see as I go along here that I've kind of expanded it. Although Brazos Valley is a generic term, it could go clear from Freeport up to the Double Mountain area up in North Texas, but I won't go that far. I tried to limit it to the trains that some of you people would remember. And I say that with a little bit of a caution too, because if you remember some of these trains, that tells the whole world a little bit about you that you might not want them to know. These were old trains. Well, it's trite to say that the railroad passenger train was very, very important to the communities in this area. In fact, we would not exist, probably, if there had not been a train. Navasota didn't exist before the trains, nor did College Station, nor did Bryan. The county seat of Brazos County was at Booneville. It might still be there, but when the Houston and Texas Central Railroad came through, they put the tracks a little bit west of Booneville and put up a station there, and everybody moved over there almost overnight. And this was repeated all over Texas. There are towns that actually disappeared overnight when a train came close by and set up the tracks and built the station. And they abandoned the little community they had. One example is Rogers Prairie, which is near Normandy, and it's on one of the railroads that we'll be looking at. Rogers Prairie disappeared overnight. These people cut down trees and made logs and rolled their houses over to the railroad tracks on those logs, literally overnight. So the railroad trains are important to our little communities and are responsible for why we are located where we are. We will discuss 9 trains that once operated in the Brazos Valley, and because of time constraints, I will omit several, such as the Santa Fe trains that passed through Caldwell. There were trains went through Caldwell and Somerville, and I don't have that covered. I had to stop somewhere because you just keep going farther and farther out, and first thing you know, you're covering every railroad in Texas. The other train that I will not talk about today is the Texas Eagle. And one reason for it is that the Texas Eagle is not exactly a ghost train. The Texas Eagle is still functioning as a passenger train. At least it uses the Texas Eagle name, and it travels over some of the traditional Texas Eagle route. But Amtrak has made some changes on the Texas Eagle route, so I don't have it. That's a whole topic of its own. The Texas Eagle is quite a train. And I used to live in Laredo, and that train would come down to Laredo, and when it got there, they would, after people got off in Texas, those who were going on to Mexico, they would stay on it, and they'd give it a push across the bridge. Just push it and let it roll. And the Mexican locomotive would catch it on the other side of the river, hook onto it, and going down to Mexico City. So it was a great train. I was there one day, and on the platform there back was a couple there, nice looking couples, waiting like this. It was Wallace Warfield Simpson and her husband. And so it was kind of an interesting thing to see that happen. Well, this topic originated at a meeting of the Texas Eagle chapter of the National Railway Historical Society several years ago. You see our little banner over there, and it's because of that, the NRHS, that I got into this railroad business. So that's why I think it's important for you folks, if you have any interest in it, to see Linda or Bob or me or somebody and start coming to our meetings. But during a meeting of our local chapter several years ago, Hoy Richards suggested that the chapter do something to preserve the railroad history of our area. Most of you knew Hoy. Hoy had a railroad background. In fact, he was the only employee at Texas A&M University whose social security number started with a 7. And that was because the railroad employees' Social Security numbers started with a 7. And their pensions were handled by the railroad board, not by Social Security. So that meant he came out at the bottom of the list because numerically 7 was last. Well, Hoy suggested that he was really trying to get us to start up a museum. Well, that was a little bit daunting for us, a little bit more than we could handle. We're not a very big organization, but I began to look at it and I thought, well, there's something we can do. We can make a start on collecting materials and worry about where we're going to show them later on. There are several venues in this area where railroad artifacts could be shown. The Brazos Valley Museum out there on the bypass. There's an interesting place on University Drive. The College Station Depot, a replica of it, sits right there on University Drive. And that might be a place to have a little nook in there where some of our railroad history could be displayed. And there are, I'm sure, other venues. Well, one of the things I learned is a little too close, you get too much echo. Yeah, cut it back.
You don't want any feedback.
Oh, yeah. I'll try not to lean in too close. One of the things I learned was that good materials are hard to find. And you can tell, look at some of those pictures over there. Those are not museum quality pictures. But it's the best we have for that particular railroad that was being built. So that's one of the things that I've learned, and so that's another reason why I'm here. I think, well, someone here has an attic, or you have a closet, you got some old photographs. If you do, bring them out to the City Hall where Ann is, and Ann will scan those and give them right back to you, and we'll have them recorded. I had another reason for getting into this. I'm not sure I can get through it, but I'll give it a try. My late wife, Naomi Shannon Boone, grew up in Brazos. Her father was the railroad agent there. He handled the telegraph and depot and all of that. And so she grew up there. The railroad in Brazos, I guess we got too much feedback now. Okay. That railroad was built in 1903 and lasted 40 years. Yeah, is that a little better? Okay. Anyway, that's called the Madisonville branch of the INGN, or International and Great Northern Railroad. And it was a lifeblood for the people in Grimes County. Think about it, in 1900, there was not one single paved road in Grimes County. And some of you may have lived there or have relatives who live there. In the wintertime, if they lived there, they stayed there till it dried up in the spring. It was pretty bad. So the railroad came in at a good time. People would ride that train from Brazos up to Madisonville, maybe 10 miles, shop in Madisonville, get back on the train, come back to Brazos. So it was a nice thing. About 1940, the Texas Highway Department thought that was a pretty good thing they had there, so they ran a paved highway parallel to this railroad, right up from Navasota all the way up to Madisonville. So now we have a paved highway there. Well, that got pretty tough for the railroad folks. People began to use cars and use trucks to haul their cotton. This all came to about the same time that cotton production in that area declined. So there are a lot of causes. You can't blame it on one thing. Cotton production declined. The people who lived in that area began to go to Houston to get jobs in the defense plants. We're talking 1940, 40, 41, 42. So they went down there and got jobs. So the railroad abandoned that branch in 1943. Well, that railroad was very important to the people who went down to the station. Every time a train rolled in, it was said that you could take the census of Brazos anytime the train was in the depot. Just go out there and count them. One salesman asked the conductor, how many folks live in Brazos? He said, well, wait till we get into the station. You can count them yourself. They'll all be out there. Well, we laugh about that, but how many of you went down to College Station and watched the trains come in? You weren't going to pick anybody up. You just wanted to watch the trains come in, see who got off, see who got on. It gave you some gossip for the week, and see who got on the train with whom. There were a lot of things to be seen. So a lot of people here did. I know I went down there many times just to watch the train. My brother-in-law was a passenger car carpenter for the Southern Pacific. And they come up and visit us. He'd want to come out there and watch the train come in. Yeah, that was his holiday. So everybody did that. Well, not long ago I made a sentimental journey to Brazos with the idea of searching for the old railroad right-of-way and the location of the old depot. I have some maps that I got off the internet that show where the right-of-way existed. And I stood right there at the side of the old depot. If you go to Brazos and you stand right in front of that community center, that's the site that used to be a depot. And I thought, well, if I close my eyes and listen very carefully, I might hear the sound of a steam locomotive chug, 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 chugging into Brazos. It might happen. Now, I know the rails are gone. There's no tracks over there. But this is a ghost train. It doesn't need any tracks. It can come through anytime. I had planned to bring one through this room and just see how many of it jump, but I didn't work out the technology for it. And as I was watching, I began to see the wispy shapes of people standing by the depot, waiting for that train. Now, I know those folks, they're all asleep in the cemetery east of town right now. But this is a ghost train. And they come out every time the ghost train comes through. Some of those folks in that cemetery are going to be there at that station. Well, someone who was with me said, "Are you okay?" For which I'm thankful. I might have gone crazy. In a flash, reality returned, and the train and people were gone. Obviously, just a dream. A true story? Well, J. Frank Dobie would say, "If it ain't true, it ought to be." And Lord Benson would say, "Jim Boone, you are no J. Frank Dobie," and he'd be right about that too. Well, with a little bit of research and imagination, perhaps we can bring back the ghost trains of the Brazos Valley. We're going to just take a brief look at them, and perhaps we can assemble maps, photographs, timetables, local train stories. I ran across some really interesting train stories. A superintendent came into Brazos one time on a special train. That was a locomotive with his private car. That's all. And he parked it there, and he was doing some inspection in the area. And that night, some of the rowdies that lived at Brazos, and if any of you know anything about Brazos, there were a few rowdies who lived over there. I had a friend from Bryan who said, we played baseball at Brazos. We knew after every game, it was obligatory to have a fight. Both sides knew that. Didn't make any difference who won. When the game's over, we have a fight, and then we all go home. So the rowdies got on that train and took it, stole it. Apparently it still had enough steam in it that it would roll, so they rolled down the track a little ways, and of course realized that they need to get back, so they rolled it back. So there are a lot of interesting stories like that. Some about the old Central and Montgomery Railroad that ran from Navasota to Montgomery. Very interesting stories about how country people reacted to those trains that came in there. And I won't, go through all those today. Well, let's take a look at the trains that served this area. The first train up here began the rail between Houston and Dallas in 1856. And they got to Navasota by 1859. That's the Houston and Texas Central. Now, railroads changed names a lot. They had a lot of aliases, and I can't follow those. I'm not even going to try. So occasionally I'll give the name of a railroad, and if you are a rail fan, you'll know that it's not quite right. One of them is the INGN. At one point, they changed their name, made a complete, total change. They removed the ampersand and put a hyphen in there. That was it. That was the change. And if you look on the internet now, the little patches that the Historical Society has, it's I-GN. They're using IGN. But people around here, anybody around here that knew that train, they will always say INGN. They just wouldn't go along with that hyphen. So I just wanted to explain why I won't be too consistent with that one. Well, the agency, TC, got up here in 1867. It got as far as Milliken, and of course there was a war going on that stopped all of that construction for a while. And once the war was over, they came on through the Bryan area, and of course a station was developed there, and that led to eventually the Texas A&M being placed here, and so a station was put up out here. That first station had a little board put on the top, and the name was simply College. If you look at the oldest picture of a depot, it will say College. This was the College Station. Well, people began to call it that, so first thing you know, it's College Station, and they changed the sign. The Houston, Texas Central, HNTC, was absorbed by the Southern Pacific Lines. Actually, it was the Texas and New Orleans Railroad Company. So it was part of the TNNO system, but that in turn was part of the Southern Pacific. And if that sounds confusing, it's completely confusing to me, and I don't try to figure out what they were doing. But if you go to the Handbook of Texas online, you'll find all the details on all of these railroads and how they were reorganized hundreds of times. And I might point out that most of those articles in the Handbook of Texas were written by George Werner. And George will be here on November the 17th, delivering a lecture out there at the seminars. So the fellow who put most of that stuff in the Handbook of Texas is going to be there in person, and he'll be very interesting. I'm looking forward to meeting him. Well, let's jump down. The trains that you folks remember that the Southern Pacific had were the Sunbeam, Hustler, and the Owl. There were other trains. And let's see, I've got them up here. The Sunbeam is the orange and yellow one, and in the interest of full disclosure, some of you may have already figured out those Sunbeams are not real trains. They are models. But at the time, that was the best I could get. Now, I do have a picture over there of a real Sunbeam. The Sunbeam was a streamlined train. It had, they used a steam locomotive. They put a skirt on it to make it look streamlined, and it did improve the looks. And there were two trains that used that equipment. One was the Sunbeam, which was an express. That train left Dallas and stopped at Ennis and College Station and Houston, and coming back, same thing. So that was a fast one. It averaged a mile a minute. Their advertising said 265 miles in 265 minutes, and some of you can testify to that. You rode to Houston at a mile a minute. Great trains. And at the time the railroad took those trains off because of declining patronage, I remember standing up in the aisles because they were full of people. I can't explain that. Well, the Hustler was equipment the same as the Sunbeam. It frequently had a locomotive that didn't have the streamlining on it. It would be black. If you've seen We've Never Been Licked, there's a sequence in there where the Sunbeam, well, a train comes into the depot down at the College Station depot. That is the Hustler, and the locomotive is pulling it is not streamlined. They used the Hustler because the Hustler stopped at every station. It was not a fast train. It stopped everywhere, even Courtney and Milliken and all those places. But it was a nice train. And I have the timetable. Let's see, on one of my boards here, I've got the Sunbeam timetable. That's trains 17 and 18, and then the other trains that they had, and the Owl. If you look carefully, you'll see a train there that all the times are in light face. That means that train was traveling at night. It would leave Dallas about 9 o'clock, get into Houston around sunup, and it had Pullmans on it. So business people would get on that train in Dallas and have a good night's sleep. And when they woke up in Houston, they could go do a day's work or call on their clients or whatever. So the Owl served its purpose there. Not many Aggies got on the Owl because it came through here around midnight. The Southern Pacific is now part of the Union Pacific system, so when you see the trains come through here, it's Union Pacific. The next railroad to come up through here was the Central and Montgomery. And You don't hear that anymore, but believe it or not, that route is still running. That was an amazing route. It was a 25-mile route. It started between Navasota and Courtney and went over to Montgomery. Those folks, and I don't have a picture of it either, of that train. That was pretty way back there. But that train really brought the folks in Montgomery out of the mud. They were stuck just like the Grimes County people were. They were really excited. And if you go on the internet, you can find a lot of stories in one of the Conroe newspapers, stories about the train that ran from Montgomery over to Navasota. Now, it's still there. That train was, that railroad was absorbed by the Gulf Coast and Santa Fe. And they extended that train from Montgomery all the way to Beaumont, going east, and then going back west over to Somerville. So that meant you could get on a passenger train in Somerville, Texas, ride that train to Beaumont. And they have a timetable, I believe it's going to be over there. So you'll see a timetable of that train, and it ran up into the 1950s. I've regretted that I never rode that train, because think about the scenery. As soon as you got out of Navasota, you're in the piney woods, and then you get into the big thicket. That thing goes through Kuntz. It goes through Silsby. It goes through all those little towns that are in the big thicket area. So it must have been a beautiful route to ride. And it's still functioning. It's just all freight now. There's no passenger train. But that was the Central in Montgomery. It's now part of the BNSF, which is Burlington Northern and Santa Fe. That merger created one of the very large railroad systems in this country. We've got Union Pacific is large, BNSF is large. So the passenger trains are gone, but that train's still running. There are trains on the route. They have not abandoned the right-of-ways. Well, the International and Great Northern, the International Railway Company and the Great Northern got merged, and they had some more names to their names too, but everybody called them the INGN. And they were created in 1873 by consolidating several other systems, and they continued to acquire other lines and became a major player in Texas in railroads. Very large, had a lot of mileage. They started a line from Spring, where it tied into the Houston main line. So the timetable shows them leaving Houston, but the track actually tied in there at Spring, Texas, and it came on up in our direction. They reached our cities here in 1900. So we've had the International Great Northern and the HNTC for a long time. The INGN was later acquired by Missouri Pacific. So some of you know it as the Missouri Pacific, and they served us here. Their last trains were number 17 and 18, and I believe that's on one of the timetables that I have over there. It'll be over here or over to your right, and you can take a look and see when those trains came through town. I don't think the square wheel train is on that timetable. Maybe that was just another Aggie joke. I don't know. But I was always told that late night Missouri Pacific train that came through here had square wheels, and they was told with a straight face. Well, the INGN, then the Missouri Pacific, it's now with us. It's part of the Union Pacific system. So the right-of-way is still there, more or less. The next train to come up through this area was the Trinity and Brazos Valley, the Bull Weevil. The company wanted to call it the Valley Line. Now, railroad companies like to have a good tag on their name that would have good public relations impact. But no matter what they do, people will rename it. You know, it's just like people give Aggies nicknames. They give their professors nicknames, is what they do. So the Valley Line, which was the Trinity and Brazos Valley, actually was called the Bull Weevil. Quite a line. It was reorganized into Burlington Rock Island in 1930. And in 1934, that Burlington Rock Island Railroad that came up from Houston through Spring, then over through Richards and Shiro, Iola, Normandy, and then went on up to Dallas, and then it went over to Fort Worth. That train in 1934 introduced the very first streamlined train in Texas. It was ahead of the Sunbeam. And I've got that one is over on the left over there. Beautiful train. It was specially designed for that service. It's a little 3-car train set. They call it an articulated set. They were not meant to be separated or tagged on. It was a set. Well, that thing, it was fast. They set their speed records running it from Denver to Chicago, running 112 miles an hour during part of that route. Let's see if I have their timing on that. I don't have it, but it was they said then the fastest train in the world. There's an odd thing about it. The fuel to run that train, it was diesel powered. They designed a special 8-cylinder diesel engine to pull that Pioneer Zephyr. And on the trip from Denver to Chicago, the fuel cost $17. Pretty good. And I got this from the Chicago Museum, and so I think they're right. And it said they burned crude oil in it, which would explain the cost. They burned crude oil in that engine. And I remember back in those days, Texas was pumping that crude oil out and giving it away. 85% of the energy went into the Allies' World War II efforts, came out of Texas, and we gave all that oil away for around $1 a barrel. Well, you have a picture of the Zephyr. In 34, the one they put on our track was called the Sam Houston Zephyr. And if you went over there to North Zoots to meet somebody, you probably met the Sam Houston Zephyr. But it was a popular train. They became so popular that that little 3-car train set wasn't big enough. So they began to add other cars. So if you look at some of the consists of those Zephyrs, it'll have a couple of articulated cars on it, and the rest will be regular passenger cars. They had to add cars. And so some of those were 10, 12-car trains. They were very, very popular. Because it was a nice-looking train, it was not painted. That silver look you see there is stainless steel, unpainted. It was a light train. It had a low center of gravity, so they could run it fast. And it was very popular. Unfortunately, this popularity came on the wrong side of the curve. Things were getting tough for railroads, and it wasn't able to save that train. So we lost those trains eventually. But before we lost them, that Texas Zephyr became, or the Sam Houston Zephyr, became the Twin Star Zephyr, and it ran from Houston to Minneapolis. That was a great way to go between Houston and Minneapolis. But it was too late to really make an impact. By that time, airlines were beginning to become popular. People were driving cars more. So down it went. Now we've got several here I'll just run through. The Herndon-Brazos Valley Railway was built about 1892. Originally it was 16 miles of track. It tied in with ING and at Valley Junction. And most of you have, some of you have been up there. You've met trains at Valley Junction, haven't you? Up there west of Hearn. It ran from Valley Junction down to Mosley's Ferry, also called Stone City. Now, Stone City was located about where Highway 21 crosses the Brazos. When you cross the Brazos on Highway 21, look to your left, and you'll be looking at land that used to be Stone City, and Mosley's Ferry was there. And that was the terminus of that little railroad. It was chiefly to haul cotton out of the bottoms there. Let's see, you got the Brazos Valley. They had problems with the Brazos River. It used to flood a lot, so they moved the track around. And the line is now part of the Union Pacific system. And I think it goes from the Stone City area through Glass and up to Hearn. And it's part of the Union Pacific system. I'm not real positive on that routing. But Bob probably is. He's been up there watching trains many times at the crossroad at Valley Junction. It's a great place to watch trains because you've got two tracks crossing, so you get to see quite a few trains. The International Great Northern Railroad built a branch from Navasota to Madisonville, and that's the one I was talking about that goes through Brazos. It meant everything to those folks over there. It's a great little line. You can see some of the right-of-way. If you go down to Navasota right now, take the Business 6 exit going south. Kind of stay to the right and hug the railroad more or less. Keep looking to the right, and you'll see a cut in the trees. Just a cut in the trees where that railroad came through there and headed over towards Madisonville. I've got 1 or 2 maps of it over here, and I put the pictures over there to show you the high-tech construction methods that were used by the International Great Northern. They used a tool called a scraper. Some people call those Fresnos, but a Fresno was bigger than that. But that man over there on the left has got one of these scrapers, and you handle it with brute strength. Scoop up some dirt, and the horse pulls it a ways, then you dump it. You lift it up and dump it. And that's how they built that railroad. So you look at it, and I think you decide it was not high tech. I have walked that right away, and I'm just about convinced that they just laid those rails on the ground. They stirred up, you can see they stirred it up some. They didn't build a grade up. There's no sign of a grade in most places, and there's not any sign of ballast. Now, when they abandoned the railroad, they try to recover some of the ballast, but they're going to leave some behind. You can't pick up every rock, and I didn't see any rocks over there. So until I find out otherwise, I'm going to have the belief that railroad did not have any ballast holding those rails together, or those tracks together, or not much ballast anyway. There's an interesting thing about that little branch line, though. Just west of Anderson, there's a little spur, and you can see, if you go to the internet and look at the maps, you see a little spur there. It goes to a gravel pit. That was put there to pick up gravel and haul it down to Galveston to build a seawall. That was 1903, and they had need for a seawall in 1903. They had a need for it in 1900 too, but it didn't get it done. Well, now the Toonerville Trolley, Bryan and College Interurban Railway, built in 1911, extended in 1916, provided passenger and express service between Ursuline Academy, Allen Academy, downtown Bryan, Delwood Park, and Union Hill and A&M College. And Union Hill is about where that barbecue and beer joint is. Who? Kapczynski, but the Martin's Barbecue. That's Union Hill is that general area, and that really was a hill. And there was an agate custom there. This was not an electric trolley. It had a gasoline engine in it that was not large enough. So when it got to Union Hill, it just couldn't go over the hill. So the rule was that agates got off, and they pushed it over the hill, and then jumped back on the trolley. It reminds me of the name of the Quanah, Acme, and Pacific Railroad. These railroads get these little funny nicknames, and you can go on the internet, Google railroad nicknames, and get a bunch of them. Some that I wouldn't want to say in here today. I remember there's one of them. Their nickname was "Hell Any Way You Take It." But the Quanah, Acme, and Pacific, the old QA&P, that was quit arguing and push. And it applied here in our little trolley. Our trolley was abandoned in 1923, so I never got to ride it. That's the year I was born. They converted to bus service, and I rode their bus many, many times, and that bus service ran until the 1950s. One more railway that you may not know about, and that's the Peavine. That was officially the Bryan and Central Texas Interurban Railway. Built in 1918. It ran from Bryan westward for about 11 miles along Highway 21. And I've got a map, it's right over there. You can see it. We went west along Highway 21, and then it crossed the Brazos on the, they used somebody else's bridge, either H&TC or INGN. I've forgotten whose bridge they used, but they worked out an arrangement because they were actually supplying freight to one of those major lines. That was their reason to exist. They'd go down to the bottoms, pick up all this cotton, haul it back up here. And so there was an incentive for the railroad to let them use their bridge. But it turned due south when it got to that Brazos. Crossed the bridge, turned due south, and followed the west bank of the Brazos. Much too close as it turned out. every time the Brazos came up, they were washed out. And finally, it became too expensive to replace the line, so they had to abandon. So that the end of that line was about 12 miles south of the Highway 21 bridge, and there was a U.S. post office there called Whitaker. It's on the maps, but I can't find any sign of Whitaker right now. I think it just blew away. But the floods just wiped them out, and it was just too expensive to keep it going. And I imagine that by that time maybe they began to pave some roads down there. And once they got paved roads, they could haul the cotton on trucks. There's always more than one reason why a train abandons. So now, over here, I've got pictures of the. There's a station in Madisonville. Can you believe that? A depot in Madisonville. There it is. And look at all the people that showed up for the train over on the right. And then there's the truck they used to bring in the ties. It looks like a wagon pulled by a mule. And those ties looked like they didn't come from a tie plant. I think they went out into those post-oak woods and cut some trees down, and maybe they had a little sawmill that they could rough saw those things into rectangular shape. You've got to, if you want to hold the rails down, you want them to be rectangular shaped. Let's see. Oh yeah, and the top upper right-hand corner, there is that could be the first train into Madisonville. That picture was made in 1903. That's the year that the tracks got into Madisonville, so that might have been the very first train. I believe I have that one there. Yeah, that's the one in Bryan. Looks like the same. It's INGN, same one. And notice on the train, if you can read it, they used to put INGN on their locomotives. You don't find many that have the hyphen. So over here I have the Madisonville branch. I've got some maps. And over here I've got one display board that covers those rockets. Those rockets are beautiful things. Did anybody here ride one of those rockets?